Baby girl, you're so damn fine, though. Wanna know if I can hit it from behind, though. I'm sipping on you like some fine wine, though. When it's over, I press rewind, though. Talking bands, I got it. Benjamins in my pocket. I traded my truth for some robbers, and he's playing Batman. Fatty's gonna rob him. Yeah. I got the Glock in my Robin. 17 shots, no 38. Yeah, I got the Glock in my Robin. 17 shots, no 30. Yeah, she's fine. Wondering will she be mine? Walk past, I press rewind. See that ass one more time. And I got this soda. Remy boys that know it. Fast money, no slow. No one can control it. Yeah. And I got this soda. Remy boys that know it. Fast money, no slow. But no one can control it. She's got class and style, street knowledge by the pound, yeah. Baby never act wild, very low key on the profile.
Yeah. All right. 1, 2, 3. We stand up. The warmest applause. Let's give it up. You can cough. You can cough. Welcome. Yeah. If you want to sit on stage, that makes things easier. Okay. Welcome to Startup Grind, Toby.
Thank you.
How many times have you been welcomed as a rock star?
Not as many as I'd like. I think I should do this more often. Maybe in my own house, I'll do this.
So your team doesn't welcome you like this every day?
No, unfortunately not. I'll have a word with them tomorrow, and maybe they can change their attitude a little bit. Maybe
probably you can justify their salary raises or lack thereof by saying like, yeah, I should be getting some special welcome.
Definitely have the Rocky theme playing.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the things. We like rock and roll at Startup Grind, and we want to make you feel special in the sense that you're paying us with your time, you're sharing your experience with this amount of people, amazing amount of people. So it's a cool thing to have, right? We're receiving you as the rock star. So he's the CTO of Typeform. We learned about Typeform in our conference when we had David Akuniev, their CEO, talking about how they disrupted the market of the forms, actually web forms, which is actually the most boring thing ever. With design and UX, they're laser focused on that. But before that, he's been also a founder. He also founded Path Intelligence, and he hired the first 20 people there, and he became the CTO. Before that, he had also been a consultant at more like the corporate side of the world. You were at JP Morgan.
Yep.
So maybe we want to start with that. How did you transition from the corporate to the startup side, and why did you do it?
So, I mean, it's interesting working for a bank for a time because you kind of get to see things at very big scale and lots of responsibility, but it's also quite a hard life. So it's not good to do for too long, but it's interesting. I mean, the tech at the time was like super expensive, and I mean, I learned a lot from that process, but it's not something you can do for very long. So I did it for a couple of years, and then the transition to the startup world, I actually worked for an angel investor for a time, doing tech due diligence on some things he wanted to invest in. And that kind of got me into like, hey, I want to do this myself. So the next step I did, which was kind of cheating, is my wife did an MBA at MIT, and I kind of went along and hung out while she did her MBA, which is actually the best way of going to MIT, because you don't have to do any of the work, and you get to see all of the interesting things that go on there. And it was actually while I was hanging around MIT that I learned about the technology that I used for my startup, which was software-defined radio, which is kind of using software to process radio signals.
Tricky question. When you're an entrepreneur, I mean, normally it's not people who come from the corporate side, and you need to be like a very resourceful person, really driven, motivated, like working hard, this and that, right? But we see oftentimes that when the company scales up and grows really big, past Series B, probably Series C, they replace the CEO with somebody from the corporate world. Why do you think that's happened?
So I think the best way I can think of this is kind of like a build versus buy argument, right? I mean, sometimes as you grow a company, you need to make sure all the skills there are to accelerate and keep maintaining the pace of development. And when you bring on external investment, you're kind of making you're committing to making a big and fast growth. And sometimes, you know, you need to bring in extra skill sets that help augment that and make sure that maintains. And sometimes you can invest in the people there from the beginning, and sometimes it doesn't quite work out. You need to, you know, maybe change some roles around. So, I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's really trying to make the most of the opportunity and, you know, make sure that the company is fulfilling its potential, which is why some of these transitions happen.
So you mentioned working in the corporate side in JP Morgan. I think you were working on the server side, then working for angel investing, then became the founder and CTO of Path Intelligence, now one of the first employees and actually the CTO of Typeform. I see you've done very different things. This question comes from the audience, and actually is, how do you choose your next job? I mean,
so I mean, it's like it's a bit sort of standard, but I mean, it's really to keep learning. I like to do different things because I like to keep trying to learn about new areas. I mean, the last Path Intelligence was very much a hardware-based business. It was which I would not recommend anybody ever do. Software as a service is way better. It scales beautifully, and you can have a much bigger reach. So, I mean, it was an interesting thing that I went through, but I learned a lot about that process. And then when going to Typeform, I wanted to learn about the more software as a service world, and so I transferred my skills across to do that.
you were one of the first employees at Typeform, and you managed to grow the team by 8 times. Before that, in Path Intelligence, you hired about the first 20 hires, 20-something. How many people here came because they want to learn how to hire tech talent? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, just a minority. Let's not talk about that. All right. No, just kidding. But so obviously you don't have a secret sauce, right? But what are the things you have tried that you want to share with the audience? Things that worked, things that didn't.
Okay, so I think for me, a lot about being a startup is about the hustle. It's about trying to find a different angle and making your money go much further than other people. If you try and play the game along with everybody else, it's difficult to make as much progress. So I mean, I always look at trying to have different approaches to things. So one of the things that we've tried to do in all of the spaces that Typeform's worked in, we make sure there's a very big meeting space. And so we host a lot of meetups and things related to technology or different parts of the business. And we use that as a way of kind of bringing in and showing people what we can do and kind of create community, like another community around some of the technologies we work in and some of the product areas we work in, so that people can kind of learn more about us. And it's kind of a good introduction to potentially showing people what's possible. We can also use it when we often link up with meetup groups, so that we kind of expand our reach and bring in those right kind of people into the company. That's worked quite well for us. I mean, I think it's been
That's
most.
one.
It's the most useful. It's been for our QAs actually. That's been phenomenal, successful at. That's one. I think. I mean, the standard thing with you can't really ignore the recruiters. You've got to do that. I mean, it hasn't been super successful for us.
When do you engage with them? Probably not in the first 10 hires, right?
Well, I mean, in the first 10 hires.
Yeah.
Well, I mean. Initially, we were using recruiters a lot at the early days. We brought some recruiters in-house, and actually we got one here tonight.
All right.
If anyone wants to be recruited by us, go and talk to Bernat. Where are you? Bernat?
Who's looking for a job, by the way?
There's Bernat. So
anybody's looking for a job here?
Who wants to work with Typeform, particularly senior devs, talk to Bernat.
Yeah.
We've brought recruiters in-house, and that's been really helpful because I think, obviously, they're not spreading their knowledge everywhere. They're kind of Bernat's super focused, and the other recruiters are very focused on Typeform and they're selling our story. So that's bringing recruiters is really good. But obviously, when you're really small, you can't do that as easily.
That's pretty hardcore, actually. It's kind of like it's difficult because it's not a productive, let's say, profile. I mean, they don't produce. Probably you want to scale your technology.
No, Bernat's amazing.
Yeah, no.
I mean,
they help, but at the beginning, it's hard to justify
well, I think it is, but I think it's super important. I mean, if you want to grow fast, you need to have somebody who's on it. I mean, what can happen is, and often it's they're leveraging the contacts you have. I mean, it's difficult, to get really good hires, you have to chase them down. You can't just wait for them to come to you. Yeah. You've got to go after them. So, I mean, often we've done things like our recruitment drives, getting all our devs together and going through their networks and saying, right, we want to find this profile. Let's all let's all try and focus on it for an hour or two. Just go through it and look for people like this.
All right.
And then the recruiters take that and they go through that list and try and reach out to those people and try and bring them in. So I mean, it's really thinking through every possible way of getting to the right kind of people and leveraging that as much as possible.
Can you share a couple of things that didn't work?
So we went to an event in the UK. I can't remember the name of it now. It was an event in London, and the recruitment events I find are really difficult because I mean, you have to spend a lot of money on stands. It's a lot of time, and it's difficult to get to. I mean, it's good if I think it works very well for the bigger companies. We've got a big brand presence and people come to them. But if you're trying to get your name out there, it's hard, and it's expensive. So that didn't work so well for us. I mean, it wasn't a brilliant experience. The other thing that drove me crazy, Stack Overflow. I mean, they have a phenomenal network, but their salespeople are terrible.
All right.
It drove me nuts. I mean, I think if you use it in the right way, it's a useful tool. But I mean, they had a massive push to sell their consultancy package, and it was super cheeky because they were asking a lot of money for something that they could produce as a report really easily. So, I mean, I think using them the right way is good, but there wasn't a great experience with Stack Overflow.
So you went beyond the usual posting a job on Stack Overflow, and then you went for like consulting?
They were offering this consultancy back. We didn't go for it in the end because it was so expensive. But I mean,
posting is expensive. It's like $4 grand a year or something.
And they do this thing whereby they want you to. I mean, it's a standard advertising thing where they want you to test the markets to work out where your ad works best, or which markets have the best response for the particular skill you're looking for. But they know this. They're basically reselling the same thing again and again. It drove me crazy. So, I mean, I think if you know exactly what you want, it's probably useful, but it's an expensive game.
Let's focus on the meetups, because we've seen this trend that there are a lot of tech meetups. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of them, they're just there because of the community. But they also, if they are organized by companies, it's mostly because of the hiring. They want to attract talent. Obviously, you want to share some cool things you do, but it's because you want to have tech talent around your company, right? Yeah,
I mean, but I think it's well, from my perspective, I think it's a fair exchange. If it's an exchange, if you're offering something. So one of the things that we do is occasionally we want to bring in like a really good expert to help teach our company. So we brought in a guy to help teach us a certain way of handling CSS a year or so ago. And what we did was say, look, you come over, teach us for a couple of days, and in the middle day, on the evening, do a meetup so you can share your knowledge with everyone who's interested around. You know, take some of the ideas and a sort of focused part of the talk and share it with everybody else. So, you know,
that's a good model.
So we're not just trying to take. It's like any community. It's a sharing process, right? And so we want to make sure that it's give and take. We want to bring people in, but we want to give something back at the same time. So it's not just a one-way street.
Yeah. How about finding a tech co-founder? I mean, obviously, you are the tech co-founder, so I'm not going to ask you, like, what are you looking for a tech co-founder? Rather, like, what were you interested in when you joined Path? Or, like, what are you usually attracted by when you're a tech person?
That's a tricky one. I mean, for me, it's
always tricky.
Yeah, it's always tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess for me, it's the opportunity, right? It's like something that's interesting, that's going to have. I mean, from my perspective, it's an interesting technology as well as an interesting business opportunity, and something that I could learn from, and also I can contribute to. I mean, it's working for a startup needs to be a good. You need to have a good relationship with the other founders. You believe in what the mission is. So I mean, it's like a lot of things, and it's just a feeling as well, right? Does this feel like this is something that's going to go crazy? And it's very personal and very subjective, right? It's not going to be right for everybody, but it's just trying to find the right fit.
There are a couple of profiles, very differentiated profiles in the CTO world. The one that wants to be very hands-on, everything, he wants the code, wants to do the peer reviews, the code reviews, and wants to, interfere pretty much in everything. Yeah. And the other one that just wants to design the architecture, hire the people, be more like a political CTO. Which one are you? And why?
So, I mean, I'd love to be the first one, but I really need to be the second one. I mean, the thing is...
Do you get that when it's a fast-growing company?
Well, the thing is, when it's fast-growing, you need to spend a huge amount of time on recruiting.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, realistically, your job, in fact, any job in the C-level, is to enable the team to do it without you. And I think anyone who gets too involved, my personal opinion is, you've got to stop yourself from getting involved because you become a bottleneck and you'll start slowing things down. And then you have a very high bust factor. If you get killed, everything stops, right? So you need to make yourself replaceable as much as possible. And to scale the company well, it's important to do that as early as you can. I mean, often the usual profile of is as a highly technical CTO, bringing in a VP of engineering fairly early on to help grow the team so he can focus on the technology still. And I think that's a good model as far as I see. It's important to think about scaling as you do this because otherwise you end up getting stuck.
I got an email from, I think, one of you. I don't know if you're here. You can relate to this story. It's like, hey, Alex, I don't know you, but can you help me find a CTO for my company? We've got this really cool company. We do like sportswear. And raise your hand if you're here. I mean, I saw you buy anything probably. And the thing is, if I don't know you, how the hell am I gonna help you to find a co-founder, right? What kind of advice would you give to these people to try to find a CTO? Because I think most of them, they're thinking like, yeah, I need a guy who codes. Well, that's not a CTO, is it?
No, I mean, it depends on what stage you're at. I mean, you probably want to have somebody who can do that. And
Yeah.
I think you want different CTOs at different stages.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very much this kind of hands-on guy who can take it, who can architect, who can do all those jobs at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But it's a different skill set from someone who can, grow a technical team and, do the interviewing process and help manage it. I mean, there are very different kind of models you need as you grow along. And it's rare to have somebody who can take it all the way through. I mean, it gets complicated because they have to have the kind of self-discipline to kind of pull back when they need to and then dive in when they should. In terms of attracting them, I don't know. I don't know about like a CTO hangout where they all kind of congregate. You could go and find one.
A CTO meetup group
Yeah,
or private?
I mean, there's a few things around. Probably one of the best CTO kind of aggregation points I've seen recently is a thing called CTO Craft, which is like a community in the UK of CTOs. That might be worth checking out. We're trying to tap into that a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I think I guess it's just reaching out. I mean, I think, often anyone in any company who's been there a while, might be looking around. And so if you see somebody who fits your profile, has the right skill set, has done the sort of things you were looking for, I mean, I would try approaching them. I mean, I think that's probably the easiest way of just reaching out to people because you never know. And often, sometimes people want to change. So it's always worth a try as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things I've learned as a developer myself is that you're not mostly attracted by the salary. Some companies, they think like, yeah, I'm going to open an office in Barcelona, I'm going to splash the cash, and just going to buy 10,000 developers in a year. No, that's just not going to happen. You can find some developers, right? But some of them are motivated by learning from a great CTO or making a dent in the universe. So what kind of developers are you hiring at Typeform?
I mean, it's a great point. And actually, you can throw money around, but those people won't last very long because they just jump to the next one.
Go to the next one,
So,
right?
I mean, and for us, our criteria change a bit. We're quite focused on the culture, so we have quite a strong focus on what we look for. Predominantly, we look for people who are curious and smart. You don't necessarily have to know everything, but we want to have the potential to get that. And we're quite an open culture. I mean, Typeform is a hugely diverse company. We've got people from all around the world, and I think we also need to find people. Although I mean, historically, technical people aren't always the best at integrating. It's people who can integrate with our companies is quite an important thing too. So it's kind of having that combination of smartness and the right kind of culture fit.
What are the things you do? Because obviously there are a lot of companies who have written their company culture in a sort of manifesto, but it ends up in the end of Google Drive, and like nobody reads it. If you don't actually embody that company culture, so in which ways are you actually doing that?
I mean, culture is like super important to Typeform.
I know it's very strong within Typeform, but
Yeah.
why? Can you give a couple of examples?
I mean, a classic example, when we, early on, we created a team, which we called the home team, who's dedicated to maintaining and building the culture in the company. And our leadership team is split into three areas, business, product strategy, and culture. And we have a huge focus on just maintaining and thinking about our values and embodying that in everything we do. So a lot of the activities we do think about how does this relate to our culture, and it's this recurring thing we're reinforcing. And it's been really important as we grow to have that culture anchor to make sure we don't change the company. Because if you think about it, as you add more people in, the company is going to change a lot. Unless you've got a very strong focus on maintaining the culture you want to have, you end up becoming part of what the new people have come in as, and you lose a bit of what you wanted to have at the beginning. So it's been something we keep reinforcing and driving throughout all of the activities we do.
I mean, if you check, Davey is the CEO, one of the CEOs of Typeform. Social profiles, he still has like UX UI designer at Typeform. He's not CEO at Typeform.
No, I mean,
so that kind of like speaks at length.
It's like you cut him in half, and he's like he can't help himself but think about UX all the time, and it means we have such a strong product that really. And I think where that comes from, I mean, really, design is a lot about empathy with our users.
Yeah.
And really, what he brings is he helps enforce that empathy, and people think about making a product, you know, beautiful and fun to use. And everything we do, I mean, obviously it becomes crazy because, you know, detail is super important. So it drives the developers crazy. We have to worry about the detail, but it makes a product what it is.
Developers don't usually like designers. There's a lot of disagreement between them. It's kind of like sales, marketing, all that. They're kind of like at loggerheads oftentimes. So how do you reconcile these things in Typeform from the developer's perspective? I actually asked that, David.
I think we kind of embrace the fact that we're such a design-heavy company.
Yeah.
And actually, the way we've built our teams is they're super cross-functional, and we actually have designers embedded in all of our teams. So they're part of the team, and so when we go on team activities, the designers go too, and they're just part of the day-to-day working with the team. They're not like a separate group. They're completely embedded.
And they're cool people as well, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, they're cool, and they can make like pretty pictures for you as well. So they're really handy people to have around.
Make things look beautiful.
Yeah, they make everything tidy. And so, I mean, I think it's just become, as we've grown, design has been such a big part of the company. There hasn't been this kind of butting our heads so much because it's just been part of how the company's grown.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about tech, because I'm curious if you want to share what's your tech stack and why did you decide to make the decision.
I mean, originally, the very first thing at Typeform was actually building Flash all those years ago.
Flash.
I know.
But let's skip that one.
Yeah,
let's not talk about Flash.
So, I mean, we still have when it was actually launched, it was written in PHP on a Symfony 2 framework. Yeah. And then lots of usual churning of JavaScript frameworks around that backbone. What we've been doing really is kind of slowly pulling apart the monolith, usual things of building services around that. We've moved heavily into React and Redux for the front end. Yeah. And the back end now is predominantly use of back end services are in Golang, which is a super nice language, but it creates some recruiting difficulties because it's not as popular as other ones. And then all of everything we have is running on AWS with using RDS as a database.
Can we actually stop a little bit here? How much does the choice of your tech stack, so the languages, determine your ability to hire afterwards? So yeah, I want to do this in Elixir, but like, who does Elixir? Like, there's a couple people in the room, maybe?
So, I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I mean, something like Golang, a lot of people love the language. Yes. And actually, I think like Golang is one of those languages where it isn't standard, so people have to actively look for it and go for it, which means that they're the kind of people who are curious. So that's why it kind of fits our profile quite well. Yeah. Whereas, you know, something like Java, there are thousands of people using Java, so it's hard to pick out the people who've got that curiosity just from the languages that they like. However, although it attracts the right kind of people, what it does do is it means you've limited the range. I mean, Golang hasn't been around, hasn't been used in anger in a lot of places. A lot of places are picking it up now, but it isn't a huge pool of talent to tap from. So it creates problems, but I mean, it's worked well for us so far. On the JavaScript end, I mean, React is going completely nuts right now. So, I mean, it's a bit easier. I mean, there's not a lot of people who've done significant React deployments. But, I mean, again, that's the knowledge is going. So, I mean, it's never easy to figure out these things, but we're working out pretty well for us at the moment.
What percentage of the MVP of Typeform ended up in production? Because that's actually a very nice concept to learn. Is like MVP in production?
MVP, what you mean now or from before?
Before, and how much is still there?
I mean, there's some significant chunks of it. I mean, actually, I mean, some of the worst. Someone said once that the thing that you never really, the first thing you do and the last thing you change is like the user sign-up process, right? Yeah. The user table is the thing you end up adding loads and loads and loads of fields to, and it becomes a mess, but you never touch it. And you know, there's part of that that's probably been around for a very long time, and it, you know, all these crazy column names that don't mean anything to anybody or don't make any sense anymore. We need to clear up. So there is definitely pieces of that in there. The things we've worked at, I mean, it's very much been a case of trying to deal with the things that help us scale. So the first thing we did to move across into a separate service was the results service. So if you think about how Typeform works, you know, we get a lot of viewers, and then we get peaks of submissions. So when we have a lot of like TV shows in Brazil and like people, Nike doing campaigns, and when that happens, we have huge numbers of people who all pile into our service doing submissions at the same time. When we had a monolith, it created huge problems because the same bit of code was being hit all at the same time. Yeah. And so pulling that out as a separate service and putting queues in place to help manage the bursts was one of the first things we did. But you know, inevitably, there's still some very old stuff kicking around inside there.
In terms of hiring, you mentioned this really good thing, right? Is some developers are attracting for really obscure languages because, like, yes, I will finally be able to do Golang and Typeform.
It's not that obscure. It's kind of okay.
Well, how many people here developing Golang?
There we go, see?
4 people, not bad.
How many people develop in Elixir? See,
right.
It's better than Elixir.
Yeah, you're right.
There we go.
By many times more.
Okay.
But so that's the point. I mean, they are attracted probably companies like you because, oh, wow, it shows that they're a cool company. They're just not using really old frameworks and stuff. But then again, it creates problems for you to hire, to find the right people. Probably not at your stage, but when you need to find 300 developers. The other one is there's a trade-off between the code base. I mean, whether you refactor it or you keep up the old things, like the old structure of the code, like, yeah, let's not touch it. So how much time do you invest in actually refactor the product?
I mean, that's like a piece of string exercise. Yeah. I mean, I think we always try, I think the way we try and approach it is that always leave the code better than when you started.
Oh yeah, right? That's a good one.
I mean, because you can't, I mean, we're always trying to chip away and improve things, but often there's not necessarily a massive point in refactoring big pieces if you're never going to touch them, or you're just going to throw that piece away and create a service which bypasses it completely. So it really depends on what we're trying to do and, you know, where the problems are lying. I mean, if we're finding that that we're constantly in a part of the code base and it's, you know, we're seeing lots of bugs there, then obviously that's worth a refactoring piece. But, you know, it's constantly trying to balance what the product needs and the improvements versus cleaning something which isn't broken. If it's not broken, why do we need to fix it?
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned before the interview is actually Frontend is going nuts. There's a new hype technology, overhyped technology every year, probably would say every 6 months. But how do you do it to differentiate what gets into the company and what not? And how do you actually implement like side projects or?
I mean, often, we try and give our developers quite a free rein in bringing things in.
All right.
I'm constantly telling front ends to calm down, bringing new stuff in, because front ends are the worst for like bringing, everything changes all the time, and they have to have
they're good people
the
too.
latest thing. Oh, they're great. I'm nothing against front end people, but they do tend to like new shiny things.
Like the designers of the developers.
Well, so yeah, I mean, we try and give them some flexibility, but it's really trying to make sure that people are being sensible. I mean, what we tend to do is keep to the sort of core of like React and Golang as the core languages. We don't try to bring in too many new things. We're more conservative around data integrity, so like databases and things. I don't really want to go down like super new databases. I like to have tried and trusted things for when we need data, but obviously, you know, you use layers. So I mean, well, we might have the core data in a transactional DB. For doing something which requires high velocity, then maybe some of the big data things make sense. So, you know, Elasticsearch is super good for handling some of the data sets we have. So it's kind of trying to use the right tool in the right place, but make sure we've got the sort of foundations in place. So we kind of, it's mostly around keeping the core. The core doesn't churn too much. The stuff around the edges we might play with a bit, and you know, I mean, we're playing with Kubernetes a bit. We're playing with some of the new things to try and when they're ready, we'll kind of bring them into the core.
Some companies invest some time or some of the developers' time into trying new things, like the famous Google 20% time, for instance, that they're not doing anymore.
Yeah.
But are you guys doing that? Do you encourage exploration in sort of like internal hackathons or test your own prototype?
Yeah. So we did a thing called the Typeform Challenge last year, which worked really, really well for us.
All right.
Where people could go and build whatever they wanted using Typeform. We also have we have Fridays for people to kind of work on some things. it's not really about working on anything, but it's really about sharing ideas. I mean, because we have these cross-functional teams, often it's difficult to make sure, well, to prevent siloing of what people are working on. So we have Fridays to kind of share what they're working on, or share something they've learned with a broader company. So to try and keep that knowledge sharing going. But I think probably the closest thing to the 20% time is probably the hackathons. We also we have a thing which we're rebooting, is once a month we'll have Fridays for people to work on open source projects, so they can work on anything open source.
Now, actually contributing to open source is also a good way of hiring, right? You can identify people who are committing to, I don't know, to React, for instance, and you say like, well, this person is really committed, is really passionate about that. We might try to hire them. Do you guys do that? Or
we haven't done that directly. I mean, I think what we're going to hope, we're going to want to do that more. As one of the things we're pushing now is to open source more of the internals of what we do.
Great.
And I think what I'd like to see from there is, particularly if we see people contributing to stuff we've done, they're a great candidate for talking to us to see if there's an interest in a match. But we haven't really picked people out from open source projects yet, I don't think.
I'm going to ask you a very tricky question, because a lot of the audience asked this one. Seems like in the tech meetups, it's kind of like trendy to share the biggest fuck-ups, right? People want to learn more about fuck-ups. What's the biggest fuck-up you've had, and how did you solve it?
So
if you can share it.
So this is a little bit technical, so hopefully I can explain it easily. So if you think about how Typeform works, you have to have a very varying data set of submission that comes in. Every form is different.
Yeah.
Now, in the distant past, before my time, I would say.
Oh, right, yeah. Git blame, wouldn't give your
absolutely.
name. Right, yeah.
So it was decided that we wanted to put that into a transactional database. And the way that we did that was pretty horrendous. So what happened was all of the data got stored in one table, and then we created views on it for every single form to have its responses. Now, that was great. And it worked okay for the first sort of few months.
All right.
But if you imagine that Typeform's been pretty successful, so we've now got a database with millions of tables, right? And to the extent whereby this is not supported by MySQL, which is a database technology, right? This is doesn't make a lot of sense. And so much so to the extent we had a MySQL consultant go, I have never seen this. I don't know what happens when we do this, right? Which is always a dangerous thing. No, it's not broken. It works, but it's really scary because this is bad.
Yeah.
And we had a situation whereby we changed some of the code, because what happens is we regenerate these. So these views are basically taking the sort of denormalized data and putting them into a table just specifically for that form. So we had to change the code, which meant that process happened a lot more frequently than it did before, without us realizing it. Someone changed something, and you didn't realize the impact. And what that meant was the database was massively hit by having to do this operation all the time. And that was the point where we thought that we wouldn't be able to handle the data we had, the amount of submissions coming in. We thought that we hit the limits of what the database was doing. And so it was a very fraught night of trying to talk to the database consultant, figure out what we could do to mitigate this issue.
How did you solve it?
Well, to be honest, it was understanding that actually it wasn't that we hit the limits of the database, which is what we thought initially, but it was actually the fact that we just made this code change that had introduced this problem. And then by reducing that impact and having this less recreations happening, everything was okay again. But I mean, it was that's something that we've been getting.
Is it kind of like a time bomb patch? You know it's going to explode sometime soon?
Yeah, there are some hokey things that we are that are never fun to have around, and you want to get rid of as soon as possible.
Do you find yourself like finding some code that's like, who the fuck did write that, and then it ended up being you actually in the beginning?
No, I don't get that very often actually. I mean, I'm trying to keep away from code now.
Yeah, but maybe something you wrote like 7 years, like 3 years back.
No, nothing, not recently.
Great. And besides the fuck up, is like, what is another thing that's really remarkable? That like, yeah, we did this and we totally crushed it. That you want to share? Something really spectacular.
I mean, probably the thing that I think we did really well is the launch of our dev portal. So what we've done recently is we've opened up so we've really re-engineered our Typeform to have APIs in the core of how it works, and then open those up to external developers to enable them to integrate Typeforms in other products. And I think that process has worked really well. We actually got on, we brought across Jason Harmon, who used to be the head of APIs at PayPal, and he's really helped us to kind of re-architect thinking about for API first. We had that massive focus, which has been great. And so now we're in a position whereby everything's a lot easier to build stuff on top of Typeform, which I think has gone really, really well. I mean, there's going to be some awesome stuff coming out next year, but because it hasn't launched yet, I can't really talk about it.
Yeah, well, I might ask you about that, but before this, I remember one remarkable time in Typeform. It was, do you guys remember when they had this video on the front page? It was a dog licking the screen? Whose idea was it, and why?
Why? It's awesome. Because I mean that.
It was a dog licking the screen?
This is what happens when you have a company full of creatives. They come up with this crazy, crazy stuff.
They thought it was a great idea?
People still talk about that video.
Yeah,
like you.
I talked about it.
Like that.
I brought it up?
Yeah. I mean, I still
probably.
like the video, actually.
Yeah.
But it was really clever because, I mean, it was just a really, I mean, it kind of involved you in, kind of got you thinking about the screen interface and, you know, the fact that this thing's in the way of what we were trying to get that done. And, I mean, look, we just have we have some really smart ideas about how, a lot of the creatives have really smart ideas about kind of bringing what we do, which is this kind of human connection to data collection, which is what really helps. And in some respects, the dog kind of embodied that a little bit. And kind of,
I think it has to do with the company culture you mentioned, right? Because I remember back in the day, most companies that were using these autoplay videos, like full screen on their homepage, just to show their office, show their product, this and that. And you guys were showing a dog licking a screen. So it's kind of like that embodied your company culture and said, like, we're dog friendly. We just like to make different things. It's design oriented. Is it really like that, or?
I mean, it really
just making shit up.
No. I mean, it really is like that. I mean, we have a very dog friendly office,
cool.
and he licks the screen a lot. So I mean, that's pretty much how it is, to be honest.
I wanted to ask, so where is Typeform technologically headed to? What are the next things we're going to see? If you can share something.
So,
what are the challenges you're facing?
The big thing we're working on right now is what we call V2, which is the kind of reworking of how you create Typeforms. So building on the work we've done around the APIs, we've reworked and made the process of making Typeforms much, much easier. And we've also, at the same time, we've reworked how you look at the results that you collect. Because that's one of the challenges when you have a Typeform is often you mix quantitative numbers and qualitative information. And displaying that on a table is super crazy. It makes it really difficult to see, you know, big text answers with numbers. And you can't quite look at the data very easily. So we've put a lot of effort and thought into how to make that much easier, as well as how to create and make Typeforms much simpler as well. So as of February-ish time, we should see that being pushed out a bit more, and that's a really big change.
Is it related to, I mean, you shared, like, I think it was back in August, around the time you announced the round, that you had these conversational forums in which, you know, you would scroll down a blog post and there was somebody typing there. It kind of like felt like the blog post was talking to you. Is it related to that? And
no,
why did you go that way?
It's a little bit separate. I mean, so we call that the conversational UI, and it's really about having a side conversation while you're consuming content, but allowing Typeform to power that side conversation. And really what we're trying to do is, I mean, we're doing a lot of experiments, and we did a bunch of them in the hackathon, around bringing conversation to data collection, making it more of a human experience. And, you know, that was one thing that worked really well for us. But it's kind of how we, I mean, it's kind of one thing to show it off as a concept, but then how do we bring that into the product, which is kind of where, you know, it takes a bit more time to work its way through. I mean, that's something we're trying to speed up.
We're gonna explore in just after this question. I wanna wrap it up. Well, with two really quick questions. The first one is, you know, Startup Grind. We have got a core value that is actually helping others. So I want to ask, how can we as a community, both globally and locally, can help Typeform?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think probably to use Typeform as much as possible.
Yeah, well, I was kind of expecting that.
No, but actually, I think, but also to look at how you use Typeform, because Typeform actually can be used in a lot of different ways. Yeah. I think everyone uses it as a standard like form gathering tool, but I mean, people have built applications on it. People have built all sorts of things around it. And I think one of the things that we want to do is think about how we can kind of take this concept of conversational data collection, which is what we do.
Yeah.
You know, how do we take that forward? How do we, what areas can we bring in? And one of the other things we did last year was experiment with using Typeform to be the control flow of a chatbot. So basically, you have a chat conversation with Typeform, because if you think of Typeform, it's a chat conversation effectively. So, I mean, it's kind of helping us to think about how we can bring this conversational data collection into new areas.
We're actually going to be sending a feedback form just to do a recap of the year, and so that you guys give us some feedback. We're always trying to improve after the event. So what's one thing I should be including in that Typeform? What? We really use it.
As a question?
Yeah, as a question, or some feature that I might just, you know.
Well, I mean, I'd love to hear what people would like to see Typeform, what's missing. I'd love to know what people think is missing from Typeform. Right. I mean, there's lots of things that we would like to, there's lots of ideas we've got, but, you know, how do we get it better? That's something I always want to try and figure out.
That's a good one. Last question before I hand it to the audience is, everybody's got a useless superpower. Which one is yours?
A useless superpower.
Something that, you know, it's really completely worthless, useless, but you do it perfectly.
Oh man, that's a complicated question.
Tonight we will be developing an Elixir, but, you know.
No, I'm not doing that.
Not that one, not that one.
My useless superpower is, I can terminate a Cat5 cable without having to look up the color codes. There you go.
All right.
That's a
good one.
That's pretty useless.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. All right. So please, big applause for Toby. Let's take some questions from the audience. Maybe Paul, Mark, want to help with the microphone? Want to be the hostess tonight? Thank you. All right. So we'll take some questions. Rules are 1 question per person. As generic as possible. Try to be very respectful of other people's time. Don't be that person that says, like, I've got 5 questions. Yeah, not that one, please. All right. Say your name first and then the question.
Hi, this is Danny. Thanks for coming, of course. I would like to know, first thing, how many software engineers are there working at Typeform, and also how you organize different teams or sub-teams, if it's done like with squads like Spotify does, or, you know, how does this work? And if these sub-teams are also multidisciplinary, and what kind of profiles?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry.
That's quite a long question.
No, it's that's like 1.5 questions. Is okay.
How many developers work at Typeform is an interesting question. But so we have around 40 devs. And around 10 QAs. What we do is we tried looking at the Spotify model. We've had difficulties mapping onto us at the size we were when we looked at it. And also what didn't work for us was that Spotify model, as it was done in that Spotify diagram, it was quite focused around technical features, and what we wanted to have was something that was based around more about the user journey. So and actually the biggest issue we had was that everybody had a different view of how to implement the Spotify model. This is what a tribe is. This is what a squad does. This is how the guild works. And so it got really difficult when one person was talking about what a squad was or what a guild was and how that should fit in. Mm-hmm. People had different ideas about it. So actually what we found was to try and take some of the broad concepts from it and give it our own naming system so that it was separate. So we have a clear redefinition of what everything was. And that really helped. And I think one thing I would say is useful is if you're going to try and take on changing your organization like the Spotify model, is try and make it your own. Because otherwise it gets really confusing with people trying to do, well, this is not what Spotify does. Spotify does this. It got really messy. So we ended up, we used a bee analogy. So we have swarms and hives and colonies. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty similar. It's a standard matrix management, really. The core unit is a cross-functional team, which we call a swarm. In a colony are multiple swarms. And that colony has a particular focus on the user journey. So broadly, we look at it as the creation aspects of Typeform, the respondent filling out a Typeform, that part of the user journey, and then someone looking at the results. There's 3 parts. And so we build the colonies around those. And in the swarms, we have it's fully cross-functional. We have designers, QA, product owner. And where this has been really useful for us is because it's been built around the user journey or the user experience, it's been really easy for the business side, like the people in the customer success team, to know exactly who to go to. You know, I know who looks after the creation of Typeform, so I can go directly to that person and say, this is an issue that you need to worry about. Whereas before, when it was based around features or components, they didn't know what the hell the component did, right? What does this component do? Which team looks after this component? That we spent a lot of time churning around trying to help identify who owned particular things. By having it based around the user journey, it's made that process much simpler. But so basically, the short answer is yes, like Spotify, but
Yes.
slightly different.
It's good. TLDR, right?
Yeah.
All right, next question. Maybe take a couple more.
Hi, Toby. My name is Alejandro. More from the product manager perspective, I'm curious about how you guys do prioritizing of tasks. You know, like you have your product backlog, the next sprint is coming in, and you've got bugs and refactoring and new feedback from users and the business side. Who's making that decision? What is that process like? Are you assigning certain percentage? Yeah.
So,
Thanks.
I mean, we try and do a certain percentage towards things like bugs and technical debt. What we found works best is when there's a really good relationship between the product owner and the team. We try and devolve as much of the work to the team to deal with as much as possible. And the product owner is to prioritize. But if there's a good relationship and trust between the product owner and the team, when the team says, look, there's some technical issues here, we've got to get this dealt with, and the product owner goes, okay, then let's work it in. And if you've got a good communication working, then it kind of naturally deals itself. You don't have to have these hard and fast laws about 20% of this or whatever. But we don't have that all everywhere. I mean, some teams don't work quite as well. So it does vary a little bit, and we need to be more prescriptive there. But broadly, it works really well with the product owner. Actually, there was one thing I was going to say that has been really useful, and it's something that I'm trying to put in, which is something that someone said to me at a conference I was on last month, which was when you have, when you're making a prioritization call, and particularly when you're doing an MVP and you're building up technical debt, is to call it out and to say, right, if the product owner is saying we have to get this done, then you're committing to this technical debt, and to label it and then put it somewhere physical to say, this is the technical debt you're building up. And then like all these post-its start building up. And so the product owner goes, okay, maybe we need to start tackling this now because it's really obvious what it is. Because technical debt is something that gets often hidden. And it's really hard to say, the developers feel it. They know it's happening because when they're coding, they can see all these issues happening all the time. But it's not really called out anywhere. And actually really calling it out and labeling it and recording it really helps to make sure that it gets dealt with and not ignored.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a couple of quick questions. Yeah, there's one over there.
Hello, my name is Peter. So you guys are based in Barcelona.
Yeah.
How does that affect recruiting? Like, how many locals do you have? How many from abroad?
I don't know the latest figures. I think we are way under 50% locals. Most of our recruitment comes from overseas, Eastern Europe, a lot of South America, England, where I'm from. I mean, it really varies a lot. We found that, I think it kind of builds. Once you kind of get into the diverse culture, then it's easier to get more diversity happening. In terms of recruitment, one of the challenges right now is it's always hard to get senior people. I think it's easier for sort of people who are less established with their lives to move to Barcelona, but senior people is hard. That's always been a challenge. And I think with the current uncertainty situation, it's even harder right now. So it is a challenge, and we have to think of creative ways to work around that.
All right. Can we take the last question before we move to the networking? Not last question.
Yeah, last question.
My question is, do you guys want to go to the networking? Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. All right, give a standing ovation, please, for Toby. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Covers it good, reap what you want. I like the way you work it. No diggity. I'm about to bag it up. I like the way you work it. No diggity. I'm about to bag it up. I like the way you work it. No diggity. I'm about to bag it up. I like the way